Forward was the only direction they knew, each man carrying fear, duty, and the weight of every life beside
May
him.
18th, 1944.
Pinned down in the jungle, he clings to
Biak
the
Island,
last sliver
Dutch
of
New
cover.
Guinea.
Every tracer
Private
reminds
First
him
Class
how
Harold
thin the
Moon
line
crouches
between
behind a
life and
shattered
death has
palm
become.
tree as machine
With a
gun
single
fire
throw,
tears
he
through the
breaks the
jungle
stalemate,
canopy above him.
forcing fire into
50
the
yards
darkness of the
ahead,
bunker
a
that held
Japanese
them
Type
back for
92 heavy
hours.
machine gun nest pours
Exhausted but
devastating
unbroken,
fire
he
from a
readies his
reinforced
last two
coral
weapons.
bunker.
Around
His
him, the
platoon has been
battlefield
pinned
burns.
down for
He
3
refuses to let
agonizing
go.
hours.
One
7
second
men
of
are already
hesitation
dead,
can mean the
their
end.
bodies sprawled
But
across the
courage or
blood-soaked ground.
desperation pushes him
Moon
forward
pulls the
anyway.
pin on his Mark II fragmentation
The
grenade, counts to
finds its
3,
mark.
and hurls it
For a
toward the
breathless
bunker's
moment,
firing slit.
silence. Then
The grenade
earth
arcs through the
shatters.
humid air, bounces off the coral
Before the
wall,
battlefield,
and
there
rolls
was
back
training,
down the slope.
repetition, correction,
Moon flattens
discipline.
himself against the ground
Here,
as the
they learned what
explosion
would one
sends
day
shrapnel
save their
whistling
lives.
harmlessly over his head.
Night
It's the 4th
operations
grenade he's
demanded
thrown today.
silence and precision.
None have made it inside.
One mistake
What
could
Moon
ignite
doesn't
the
know
hillside.
as he lies there,
Forward was
ears
the only
ringing,
direction
throat
they
burning
knew.
from gunpowder
Each
smoke,
man carrying
is that he's
fear,
about to violate
duty, and
direct
the weight of
orders from
every
the
life
U.S.
beside
Army
him.
Ordnance Department. He's going to use the wrong type of grenade. A grenade explicitly forbidden for the exact situation he's facing. His decision will be called reckless by officers, dangerous by weapons experts, and a court-martial offense by the rulebook. By sunset tonight, he'll have cleared 20 Japanese bunkers single-handedly. His unauthorized technique will save an estimated 400 American lives in the next 6 weeks. And the U.S. military will spend the next year trying to pretend his method doesn't work. The problem begins 2 years earlier during the Guadalcanal campaign in 1942. American forces encountered Japanese defensive tactics unlike anything they faced in training camps back home. While European warfare emphasizes trenches and above-ground fortifications, Japanese commanders in the Pacific exploit natural terrain with devastating effectiveness. They dig into hillsides, reinforce coral caves, and create mutually supporting bunker networks that turn every island into an impenetrable fortress. The Mark II fragmentation grenade, America's standard hand grenade since 1918, is designed for open warfare on European battlefields. Its serrated cast iron body fragments into deadly shrapnel with a kill radius of 10 meters. In European hedgerows and open fields, it's devastatingly effective against exposed infantry. But Pacific bunkers present an entirely different challenge. The grenades must enter through small firing slits, often no wider than 8 inches, positioned at awkward angles, designed specifically to deflect incoming ordnance. They must detonate inside the bunker, not outside where thick coral walls absorb the blast like a sponge soaking up water. The failure rate is absolutely catastrophic. Field reports from Tarawa in November 1943 document a horrifying statistic that only 1 in 12 fragmentation grenades successfully enters enemy bunkers. The rest bounce off coral walls, roll down slopes, or detonate harmlessly outside, while Japanese machine gunners laugh and keep firing. Each failed throw gives defenders precious time to return fire time to call for reinforcements, time to kill more Americans. The U.S. Army Ordnance Department responds with a flurry of solutions throughout 1943. They develop special grenade-launching rifles that prove too cumbersome in jungle warfare. They design longer fuses to give soldiers more throwing time, but this only gives Japanese defenders more time to kick the grenades back out. They create elaborate training courses teaching proper throwing angles, weight distribution, and trajectory calculation. None of it works. The bunker problem persists, growing worse with each island campaign. By early 1944, Army weapons experts reach an ironclad consensus. Fragmentation grenades are the only safe option for bunker assault. The official Field Manual 2330 explicitly states this in language so clear that even a fresh recruit can understand it. The reasoning seems completely sound to everyone in Washington. Fragmentation grenades have multiple safety features, predictable fuse times, and proven lethality against exposed troops. More importantly, they're specifically designed to be thrown by infantrymen under combat stress. The alternative white-phosphorus grenades are classified as chemical weapons, intended only for smoke screens and signaling friendly positions. The M15 white-phosphorus grenade carries stark warnings printed in blood-red letters across its casing. Not for offensive use. The chemical inside burns at 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit and continues burning even underwater, even in mud, even when you try to smother it with sand. Army safety regulations explicitly prohibit throwing white phosphorus grenades into confined spaces due to catastrophic risk of burns to friendly forces. The official doctrine is absolutely unambiguous, written by men with decades of weapons experience. Using white phosphorus against bunkers is forbidden. Period. End of discussion. But doctrine written in air-conditioned offices in Washington doesn't account for the brutal reality of dying on a Pacific island. The stakes escalate with horrifying speed through each island campaign. Kwajalein in February 1944 costs 372 American casualties. Eniwetok in March adds 339 more young men to the casualty lists. The reports stack up on polished desks in the War Department. General Douglas MacArthur's staff calculates a grim projection that makes even hardened officers go pale. At current casualty rates, the drive toward the Philippines will cost over 50,000 American lives before the end of 1944. That's 50,000 telegrams to mothers, 50,000 flag-draped coffins, 50,000 families destroyed. On Biak Island, the situation becomes absolutely desperate within days of landing. The 41st Infantry Division lands on May 27, 1944, expecting light resistance based on faulty intelligence reports. Instead, they encounter Colonel Naoyuki Kuzume's 11,000-man garrison entrenched in the most elaborate cave system American forces have seen in the entire Pacific campaign. The Japanese have spent 6 months fortifying their positions with meticulous German engineering principles. Some bunkers have walls 3 feet thick, reinforced with steel rails from a demolished railway. Others are positioned in natural coral formations that make them virtually immune to artillery fire. American howitzers can pound these positions for hours without effect. The division's grenade supply dwindles at an alarming rate. Quartermasters start rationing fragmentation grenades to just 3 per squad per day. Officers order soldiers to use rifle fire and bayonets when possible to conserve explosives. But rifle fire doesn't penetrate bunker walls designed to withstand artillery, and bayonets don't reach machine gunners firing from cave mouths 30 yards away. Harold Moon is nobody's idea of a military innovator or tactical genius. Born in 1922 in Grundy County, Iowa, Moon dropped out of high school after 10th grade to work on his father's struggling dairy farm during the depths of the Great Depression. He has no engineering training, no weapons expertise, no tactical education beyond the standard 13 weeks of basic infantry school that every drafted private receives. His service record lists him as average in marksmanship and satisfactory in grenade throwing, the kind of evaluation that means absolutely nothing special. Before Pearl Harbor, his biggest decision was whether to plant corn or soybeans in the North 40 acres, and whether to buy feed on credit or wait until harvest. Moon receives his draft notice in January 1943, one of millions of young American men swept up in the machinery of total war. He reports to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, where he learns to march, shoot, and follow orders without question. After 13 weeks of training that transforms him from a farm boy into an infantry soldier, he ships out to the Pacific as a replacement rifleman, just another anonymous face in an endless stream of reinforcements. He's assigned to Company E 163rd Infantry Regiment, 41st Infantry Division. His job is brutally simple. Follow orders, shoot straight, don't get killed. Try to keep your buddies alive if you can. But Moon possesses one skill that doesn't appear in any Army manual or training syllabus. He understands physics through pure intuition, not through equations or textbooks. Growing up on a farm teaches you things that classroom education never can. He learned to judge trajectories by throwing hay bales into lofts 20 feet above the barn floor. He calculated angles by tossing tools to his father across barn rafters without hitting support beams. He knows instinctively how objects move through space, how weight affects flight path, How to compensate for wind and gravity without thinking about it consciously. It's the kind of knowledge that comes from 10,000 throws, 10,000 unconscious calculations. On Biak, as Moon lies behind that shattered palm tree on May 18th, watching his fourth grenade fail spectacularly, he observes his platoon sergeant throw yet another fragmentation grenade at the Japanese bunker. The grenade hits the coral wall at a 45-degree angle, bounces backward, rolls downhill. Moon sees the problem with absolute clarity in that moment. The Mark II grenade is fundamentally wrong for this job. It's too light, weighing only 21 ounces. It's too round, with a shape specifically designed to fragment, not penetrate. It's too bouncy, with a hard metal casing that rebounds off solid surfaces. Throwing it at a coral bunker is exactly like throwing a baseball at a concrete wall and expecting it to go through. Physics absolutely guarantees failure. Moon's moment of breakthrough insight comes from the most unlikely source imaginable: a mistake in the supply chain. That morning, during the pre-dawn equipment check, someone back at Battalion Supply made an error in the chaos of combat logistics. Mixed in with Moon's standard grenade allotment are two M15 white-phosphorus grenades, the chemical weapons clearly marked not for offensive use in letters that seem to scream warnings. Moon knows the regulations cold. He's sat through the safety briefings. He's read the field manual passages. White phosphorus grenades are for smoke screens only. Using them offensively violates standing orders from the highest levels of command. A private who disobeys these regulations faces court-martial possible execution for violating the laws of war. But as Moon studies that Japanese bunker through the acrid smoke and chaos, as he watches another American soldier die trying to follow regulations that don't work, he sees something that weapons experts back in Washington have completely missed. The M15 white phosphorus grenade is significantly heavier than the Mark II, weighing nearly 2 full pounds compared to 21 ounces. That extra weight means more momentum, more stability in flight, less bounce on impact. The fuse is shorter too, only 4 seconds compared to the Mark II's 5-second delay. 1 less second for Japanese defenders to react, to kick it back out to take cover. And the white phosphorus itself possesses a property that fragmentation shrapnel simply doesn't have. It keeps burning relentlessly, filling enclosed spaces with choking smoke and unbearable heat that makes defense absolutely impossible. Moon pulls one of the M15 grenades from his web gear with hands that shake slightly from adrenaline and fear. He weighs it carefully in his palm, feeling the crucial difference in mass. His platoon sergeant notices immediately, eyes going wide with alarm. "Moon, what the hell are you doing? Those are smoke grenades, Private. Put it back right now." Moon doesn't take his eyes off the bunker. "They're heavier, Sarge. They won't bounce off like the Mark II's." The sergeant's face goes red with anger and fear. "That's not what they're designed for. You'll kill us all. That's a direct order, Private. Put that grenade away immediately." Moon looks at the bunker, spitting fire at his friends. He looks at the 7 dead men scattered across the jungle floor, boys from Iowa and Nebraska and Kansas, who'll never see home again. He looks at the Mark II grenades that have failed 4 times in the last hour. He makes a decision that will either save his platoon or get him executed by firing squad. He pulls the pin with a sharp metallic click that sounds impossibly loud in his ears. Moon's first throw is absolutely perfect. Years of farm work, 10,000 unconscious calculations, and pure desperate hope combine in one fluid motion. The M15 grenade arcs through the humid jungle air, heavier and infinitely more stable than the bouncing Mark II's. It doesn't ricochet off the coral wall like a rubber ball. Instead, it drops straight through the bunker's 8-inch firing slit, like a stone falling into a well, like it was always meant to go exactly there. Moon counts in his head the longest 4 seconds of his entire life. 1001, 1002, 1003, 1004. The bunker doesn't explode with the sharp crack of fragmentation. Instead, something far more terrifying happens. Thick white smoke erupts from every opening like a volcano, releasing pressure built up over centuries. The temperature inside that coral cave spikes instantly to 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to melt steel, hot enough to ignite anything remotely flammable. The white phosphorus ignites everything it touches in milliseconds. Wooden support beams burst into flames. Ammunition boxes cook off in secondary explosions. Human flesh burns with a smell that Moon will never forget for the rest of his life. The Japanese Type 92 machine gun falls completely silent. No more muzzle flashes. No more bullets snapping through the air. Just thick white smoke and the screams of dying men trapped in a chemical hell. Moon's platoon sergeant stares in absolute disbelief, his anger forgotten in the face of undeniable success. Did that just actually work? He whispers the words like he's witnessed a miracle. 70 yards to the left, another Japanese bunker opens fire immediately, trying desperately to cover the destroyed position to maintain the defensive line. Moon doesn't hesitate for even a second. He grabs his second and final M15 grenade from his web gear, his hands steady now with the confidence of proven success. He calculates the angle with that instinctive physics understanding compensates for the slightly longer distance adjusts for the wind coming off the ocean. He throws. Another perfect entry through an impossibly small opening. Another eruption of white smoke and chemical fire that turns coral caves into crematoriums. Another machine gun falling silent forever. The sergeant finds his voice finally. Get this man more of those grenades right now. His training and regulations war with the evidence of his own eyes. But Sarge, those are smoke grenades. We don't use them for offensive operations. The field manual explicitly forbids. The sergeant cuts him off with a gesture toward the 2 silent bunkers, toward the 7 dead Americans who died following regulations. I don't care what the manual says anymore. Get him more white phosphorus grenades immediately. That's a direct order. The platoon advances cautiously, hardly believing their sudden good fortune. Moon moves from position to position with growing confidence, using the forbidden grenades with almost surgical precision. The heavier weight makes them dramatically easier to control in flight. The shorter fuse gives Japanese defenders less time to react to kick them back out to escape. And the white phosphorus itself creates conditions inside those coral bunkers that make any defense utterly impossible. Burning chemical smoke that can't be extinguished with water or sand. Heat so intense it makes steel weapons too hot to hold. An atmosphere that sears lungs with every desperate breath, that burns eyes blind, that turns strong defensive positions into death traps in seconds. By noon on May 18th, Private Harold Moon has personally cleared 8 fortified Japanese bunkers, each one that would have cost multiple American casualties using conventional tactics. His company advances 400 yards through terrain that should have taken 3 days to capture. It's the fastest progress the 41st Division has made since landing on this cursed island 5 days ago. Word spreads through the battalion with the speed of wildfire in dry grass. That crazy private in Easy Company is using white phosphorus grenades on bunkers, and it's working. Soldiers who've been throwing Mark IIs uselessly for days suddenly want to know more. How does he do it? What's the technique? Can we get some of those grenades? By the time the sun sets on May 18, 1944, Harold Moon has cleared 20 Japanese bunkers using white phosphorus grenades and his farm boy understanding of trajectory physics. His unauthorized technique has enabled his company to advance nearly a full mile through some of the most heavily fortified terrain in the Pacific Theater. That's more progress than the entire battalion made in the previous 3 days combined, more than staff officers thought possible without massive casualties. The question now facing the U.S. Army isn't whether Moon's method works. The evidence is undeniable, written in silent bunkers and advancing American lines. The question is whether they'll adopt his forbidden technique or court-martial him for violating regulations that everyone knows don't work. Because somewhere in that tension between doctrine and reality, between following orders and saving lives, lies a truth that will change Pacific warfare forever. Sometimes the most important innovations come from people nobody expects. Sometimes courage means knowing when to break the rules. And sometimes a farm boy from Iowa sees solutions that weapons experts with decades of experience completely miss. In Part 2, we'll see what happens when Moon's technique reaches battalion headquarters, when career officers must choose between regulations written in Washington and soldiers dying on Pacific Islands, when one private's unauthorized innovation forces the entire U.S. Army to confront an uncomfortable truth about their weapons doctrine. Private Harold Moon cleared 20 Japanese bunkers in one day using forbidden white-phosphorus grenades. His unauthorized technique saved hundreds of American lives and advanced his company a full mile through impossible terrain. But success on the battlefield means nothing if the Army refuses to admit it works. May 20th, 1944. Battalion headquarters 2 miles inland from the Biak beachhead. Lieutenant Colonel Alexander McNabb reads Captain James Winters's after-action report with mounting alarm. The document describes Moon's bunker-clearing success in careful military language, but it also documents systematic violation of weapons regulations that could get everyone involved court-martialed. McNabb's hands shake slightly as he reads the casualty figures. 20 bunkers eliminated. 0 American casualties during those assaults. 400 yards of advance in 8 hours. Numbers that should be impossible. And at the bottom of the report, a single recommendation that could end McNabb's career. Request immediate authorization for tactical employment of M15 white-phosphorus grenades against fortified positions. McNabb picks up his field telephone and cranks the handle. Get me all company commanders and staff officers. Emergency meeting in 30 minutes. This is about to get worse. Major Robert Thornton arrives first at the command tent. He's a career ordnance officer, a graduate of Aberdeen Proving Ground Weapons School, who spent 15 years studying military explosives before the war. Thornton has written technical manuals, designed training programs, and advised generals on weapons policy. His entire professional reputation rests on one fundamental principle. Regulations exist for good reasons. They're written in blood lessons learned from thousands of soldiers who died because someone decided to improvise. When Captain Winters presents Moon's results to the assembled officers, Thornton interrupts before the third slide. This is insanity. White phosphorus grenades are not designed for offensive use. They're chemical weapons with unpredictable effects in confined spaces. We have explicit regulations against this for very good reasons. Winters responds with calculated calm, knowing this fight determines whether men live or die. The regulations assume our standard grenades work effectively, Major. Field evidence proves they don't. Not against coral bunkers. Thornton's face reddens. Then we need better throwing techniques, improved training protocols, modified grenade designs. We've had better training for 2 years now. Moon clears his throat from the back of the tent where junior officers stand. Permission to speak, Sir McNabb nods. Go ahead, Private. Sir, with respect to Major Thornton, I've thrown over 200 Mark II grenades at Japanese bunkers in the last month. Exactly 4 made it inside. That's a 2% success rate. The M15 grenades have a 70% success rate because they're heavier and don't bounce. The physics is simple. Thornton slams his fist on the table hard enough to make coffee cups jump. Do you understand what white phosphorus does to human tissue? Private. It burns through skin, through muscle, through bone. It cannot be extinguished with water. If even a single fragment lands on one of our own men during the throwback, he'll burn alive. Our own men are dying right now because we're using weapons that don't work. Moon's voice stays steady, but his eyes are hard. I've cleared 20 bunkers without a single friendly casualty. How many more Americans need to die following regulations that guarantee failure? The tent erupts into chaos. Officers shout over each other, decades of doctrine colliding with battlefield reality. Some support Winters and Moon. They've watched the bunker problem kill their men for months, tried everything the manuals recommend, watched it all fail. Others stand with Thornton. The regulations exist for safety reasons that transcend one private's lucky streak. Abandon them, and you open the door to chaos, to soldiers making tactical decisions they're not qualified to make. Colonel McNabb lets them argue for exactly 5 minutes, watching the battle lines form. Then he raises his hand for silence. The tent goes quiet, except for the distant rumble of artillery. Bring me the casualty reports from the last week. A staff lieutenant produces a folder thick with typed forms. McNabb reads aloud. May 13th. 2nd Battalion assaults Hill 265. 18 bunkers eliminated. 47 casualties. May 15th. 3rd Battalion takes the coastal ridge. 22 bunkers eliminated. 61 casualties. May 18th. Company E. Moon's unit advances through the southern approaches. 20 bunkers eliminated. 0 casualties. He closes the folder and looks directly at Thornton. Major, your professional opinion. Is this result statistically significant, or is Private Moon just extraordinarily lucky? Thornton's jaw works silently. You can see the war between his training and the evidence right there on his face. Finally, he speaks. Sir, one day's results aren't conclusive. We need controlled testing, proper documentation, risk assessment protocols. McNabb cuts him off. How many days of testing do you need, Major? Because at current casualty rates, we'll lose another 100 men this week alone. I don't have time for Aberdeen Proving Ground procedures. I need solutions that work today. But Moon finds an unexpected ally in the most unlikely place. Lieutenant David Chen, the battalion intelligence officer, speaks up from the corner where he's been silent throughout the meeting. Chen is a Chinese American from San Francisco, one of exactly 3 Asian American officers in the entire 41st Division. He's a Caltech graduate with a degree in chemical engineering who enlisted after Pearl Harbor and fought through 3 campaigns to prove his loyalty. Colonel, permission to address the technical concerns. McNabb nods. Lieutenant Chen walks to the map table and pulls out a notebook filled with calculations. I've been analyzing Private Moon's technique from an engineering perspective. The Mark II fragmentation grenade has a terminal velocity of approximately 42 feet per second with a coefficient of restitution against coral of 0.7. That means 70% of impact energy converts to bounce. The M15 white-phosphorus grenade weighs nearly twice as much with a coefficient of restitution of 0.3 due to its lead-weighted body. That's why it doesn't bounce. He flips to another page covered in diagrams. The 4-second fuse combined with proper throwing technique gives defenders insufficient time to react. The white phosphorus creates an atmosphere inside bunkers with a temperature exceeding 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit and oxygen content below 6%. This makes defense physiologically impossible within 8 to 12 seconds of detonation. From a pure physics standpoint, this weapon is optimal for the stated mission. Thornton tries to interrupt, but Chen continues. As for safety concerns, I've reviewed Private Moon's throwing technique. He only engages bunkers where the angle of entry exceeds 30 degrees from horizontal, which prevents splashback. He maintains a minimum standoff distance of 25 yards. These protocols, if codified and taught, would minimize friendly fire risk to acceptable levels. McNabb studies. Chen carefully. You're saying this can be systematized. Taught to other soldiers safely. Chen nods. I'm saying Private Moon has empirically solved a tactical problem that's killed hundreds of Americans. We can either ignore it because it violates peacetime regulations, or we can test it properly and potentially save thousands of lives. The tension in the tent shifts. Chen has reframed the entire argument from regulations versus chaos to evidence versus ideology. McNabb makes his decision. Major Thornton, you're going to hate this order. Effective, immediately authorize supplemental issue of M15 white phosphorus grenades to all rifle companies. Lieutenant Chen, you will develop a training protocol based on Private Moon's technique. Captain Winters. Private Moon is temporarily assigned to battalion staff as a tactical instructor. We will conduct a formal demonstration for division headquarters in exactly 48 hours. Thornton's face goes pale. Sir, this violates Ordnance Department directives from the highest levels. If Division Command disagrees, then Division Command can court-martial me. McNabb's voice cuts like steel. but I'm not losing more men following regulations that don't match battlefield reality. Meeting dismissed. As officers file out, Chen approaches Moon. Private. I need to document everything about your technique. Throwing angles, standoff distances, target selection criteria. Everything. Moon looks uncomfortable. Sir, I just throw grenades. I don't know about coefficients or whatever you said. You understand physics better than most engineers, you just don't know the vocabulary. Chen pulls out his notebook. Let's start with how you decide which bunkers to engage and which to avoid. The next 48 hours transform into organized chaos. Chen and Moon work through the night developing protocols. They measure throwing distances, calculate angles, establish safety margins. Chen translates Moon's intuitive understanding into concrete procedures that other soldiers can follow. Meanwhile, Thornton makes his position clear to anyone who'll listen. This is dangerous precedent. Today, we ignore regulations about grenades. Tomorrow, some private decides to modify artillery fuses or jury-rig demolitions. Where does it end? But the results from the front lines keep coming in. Companies that receive M15 grenades and basic instruction report dramatic reductions in casualties. 1st Battalion clears 32 bunkers on May 21st, with only 6 wounded. 3rd Battalion advances 800 yards in one day, previously unthinkable progress. The technique spreads organically through the division faster than official channels can control. Soldiers talk in foxholes. Squad leaders share tactics. By May 22nd, companies that haven't received official authorization are trading cigarettes and rations for white-phosphorus grenades from supply sergeants. The black market in forbidden weapons becomes the division's worst-kept secret. May 23rd arrives. The formal demonstration. General Horace Fuller, commander of the 41st Division, flies in from rear headquarters with his staff. These are men who graduated from West Point decades ago, who fought in World War I, who learned warfare from textbooks written before airplanes existed. They're skeptical of innovations from privates. The test site is a captured Japanese position 300 yards from the front lines. Engineers have set up an observation post with sandbags and a clear view of 3 intact enemy bunkers. Fuller arrives precisely at 0900 hours with an entourage of colonels and majors. He looks at Moon, this farm boy private, with undisguised skepticism. So you're the soldier who thinks he knows better than the Ordnance Department? Moon stands at attention. No, sir. I just found something that works better than what we were doing. Fuller's aide hands him a clipboard. Your orders say these white phosphorus grenades are for smoke and signaling only. Explicit prohibition against offensive use. Yes, sir. And you violated those orders. Yes, sir. Why? Moon meets the general's eyes. Because men were dying, sir. Following regulations that guaranteed failure seemed wrong when there was a better way. Fuller studies him for a long moment. Show me. Moon moves to the throwing position Chen has marked with stakes. He explains the technique step by step, his voice steady despite the audience of high-ranking officers. Target identification, angle calculation, standoff distance, throwing mechanics. Then he demonstrates. The first M15 grenade arcs through the air with perfect stability. It drops through the bunker firing slit like Moon has done this 1,000 times. 4 seconds later, white smoke erupts. The second throw targets a bunker with a smaller opening positioned at an awkward upward angle. Moon adjusts his throwing motion, compensates for the trajectory. Another perfect entry. Another chemical fire. The third bunker is the real test. Its firing slit is partially blocked by debris barely 6 inches wide. Fuller whispers to his aide that there's no way anyone makes this throw. Moon studies the target for 30 seconds, calculating. Then he throws with a sidearm motion that sends the grenade on a flat trajectory. It slips through the opening with inches to spare. The observation post goes silent as white smoke pours from all 3 bunkers. Fuller walks forward to inspect the results. The bunkers are completely neutralized. The coral walls are blackened from chemical fire. The temperature inside is still high enough that you can't approach within 10 feet. He turns to Thornton. Major, your professional assessment. Thornton's voice is strained. Sir, the technique is effective. But it still violates regulations written for good reasons. Those regulations assumed our standard weapons worked. Fuller's tone is flat. They don't. Not here. What's our casualty rate been since companies started using this method? A staff officer consults his notes. Down 68%, sir. Companies using white-phosphorus grenades are advancing 3 times faster with 1/3 the casualties. Fuller looks at the smoking bunkers at Moon standing there looking uncomfortable with all the attention at the evidence that can't be argued away. He makes the decision that will save thousands of American lives. Effective immediately, the 41st Division authorizes tactical employment of M15 white-phosphorus grenades against fortified positions. Major Thornton, you will develop official protocols based on Lieutenant Chen's documentation. Captain Winters, Private Moon is promoted to sergeant and assigned as divisional instructor for advanced bunker assault tactics. He'll train 1 soldier from each company starting tomorrow. And someone get Division Public Affairs to document this properly. When this technique spreads to other divisions, I want credit going to the 41st. Thornton tries one last time. Sir, this sets dangerous precedent for field modifications of doctrine. Fuller cuts him off. The dangerous precedent is losing men because we're too stubborn to admit when peacetime regulations don't match battlefield reality. Are we clear, Major? Yes, sir. The word spreads through the Pacific Theater with shocking speed. The 41st Division's success can't be hidden. Other divisions hear rumors, request information, demand access to the technique. By June 1944, the 1st Marine Division adopts white-phosphorus grenades for bunker assault during the Paleolithic planning phase. The 96th Infantry Division incorporates the tactics into their training for Okinawa. Field Manual 23-30 is quietly revised, with a new appendix buried on page 247, describing alternative employment of smoke grenades in special circumstances. The manual never mentions Moon by name. The Ordnance Department never officially admits their regulations were wrong. But the soldiers know. Veterans of Biak spread the technique through informal channels. Moon spends June and July traveling between units demonstrating his methods, training squad leaders. He's uncomfortable with the attention, but he understands the stakes. Every soldier who learns this technique properly is a soldier who might survive the war. Japanese intelligence reports document the change with alarm. A captured situation report from Colonel Kuzume dated May 28 reads, American forces now employ chemical fire weapons against cave positions with devastating effectiveness. Our strongest defensive positions become untenable within minutes. Request guidance on counter-tactics. There are no effective counter-tactics. When white phosphorus fills a bunker at 5,000 degrees, you either evacuate or die. The Japanese defensive doctrine that dominated Pacific warfare for 2 years collapses. But success creates new complications. As white phosphorus grenades become standard issue across the Pacific supply chains, strain. Production facilities in the United States struggle to meet demand that's increased 5-fold in 2 months. Quality control issues emerge. Some grenades have defective fuses. Others leak phosphorus during storage in tropical humidity. Soldiers start reporting accidents. In July, a careless private in the 77th Division pulls the pin on an M15 grenade and drops it near his own foxhole. The resulting fire kills 3 men and wounds 7 more. Another incident on Guam. A white phosphorus grenade detonates prematurely during loading onto a landing craft. 42 casualties. Thornton compiles every accident report, every safety violation, every death from the weapons he warned about. He sends them up the chain of command with a clear message. I told you this was dangerous. His warnings gain traction in Washington, where officers who've never seen combat make policy decisions. The Ordnance Department considers a full recall of white phosphorus grenades from front-line units. Politics and bureaucracy threaten to undo everything Moon accomplished. And just as Moon's technique becomes accepted doctrine, a new threat emerges. Japanese intelligence has been studying American tactics, analyzing captured equipment, interrogating prisoners. They're developing countermeasures specifically designed to neutralize white-phosphorus grenades. Modified bunker designs with multiple compartments and ventilation systems. Tactics for rapid evacuation and counter-assault. Training that teaches defenders to kick grenades back out before detonation. The weapon that changed everything is about to face its greatest test. August 2, 1944. Moon receives orders to report to 6th Army headquarters in Hollandia. General Walter Kruger wants to discuss expanding the white-phosphorus program, but intelligence reports suggest Japanese forces are adapting faster than expected. The technique that saved hundreds of lives on Biak may not work as well on the next island. And somewhere in Tokyo, Japanese military planners are developing their response to the American innovation. They're studying the physics, the chemistry, the tactics. They're designing bunkers that can survive white-phosphorus assault. They're training soldiers to counter techniques that seemed unstoppable just weeks ago. The war is evolving faster than anyone anticipated. Moon's innovation bought time and saved lives, but the enemy is learning. In Part 3, we'll see what happens when Moon's technique faces its ultimate challenge. When Japanese forces implement their countermeasures. When the weapon that changed Pacific warfare encounters defenses specifically designed to defeat it. When innovation must evolve or die. And when Moon himself must make an impossible choice between following the doctrine he created and abandoning it for something even more dangerous. The real war is just beginning. Harold Moon invented a forbidden technique that cleared 20 bunkers in one day. The Army tested it, approved it, deployed it across the Pacific. By August 1944, white-phosphorus grenades have become standard weapons against Japanese fortifications. But success has consequences. When innovation changes warfare, the enemy must adapt or die. The Japanese chose to adapt. Intelligence reports from Tokyo show they're analyzing captured M15 grenades, interrogating prisoners, about throwing techniques, redesigning bunkers specifically to counter white-phosphorus assault. In just 6 weeks, Moon's weapon has gone from secret innovation to arms race. And now, this isn't an experiment anymore. This is total war, where both sides evolve or face extinction. Japanese Imperial Headquarters receives its first detailed reports about American white-phosphorus tactics on June 15, 1944. Colonel Takeo Yamazaki, Chief of Defensive Operations, reads the casualty statistics from Biak with mounting horror. 18 fortified positions lost in 3 days. Over 400 defenders killed without inflicting significant American casualties. Survival rate in bunkers attacked with chemical fire weapons drops to 12%. These numbers represent complete tactical failure. Yamazaki calls an emergency meeting of defensive specialists. The men who designed Japan's bunker warfare doctrine, who turned coral caves into fortresses, who made every Pacific island cost thousands of American lives. They study photographs of burned-out positions. They read interrogation reports from captured Americans who describe the throwing techniques. They analyze fragments of recovered M15 grenades. Their conclusion is unanimous and terrifying. American forces have found the counter to our primary defensive strategy. General Hideki Tojo himself reviews the reports. His response is immediate and uncompromising. All defensive positions must be redesigned within 60 days. New construction standards, multiple compartments, blast doors, ventilation systems that can be sealed, counter-assault protocols. The Emperor's armies do not yield advantages to the enemy. Japanese engineers work frantically through July designing bunker modifications. They add internal walls to contain white phosphorus spread. They install metal doors that seal firing slits when grenades approach. They dig deeper caves with escape tunnels. Some positions receive primitive air filtration systems using wet cloth and sand. But modifications take time and resources Japan doesn't have. Meanwhile, American forces advance with their new weapon. The immediate Japanese countermeasure is simpler and more brutal. Train defenders to kick grenades back out before detonation. 4-second fuses leave a narrow window. If soldiers react instantly when white phosphorus enters their position, they might survive. The training is as desperate as it sounds. Japanese instructors demonstrate the technique using dummy grenades on Palau Island in late July. The key is recognizing the M15 by its distinctive shape and weight when it enters. Don't think. Don't hesitate. Kick it back immediately toward the opening. Accept that 10% of soldiers will die in training accidents. Accept that 20% will freeze in actual combat. It's still better than 100% death rate. The first reports of successful counter-kicks reached Tokyo on August 3rd. A bunker on Peleliu kicked out 3 white phosphorus grenades during an American assault. The position survived. Defenders killed 4 Americans before withdrawing. It's one small victory against a tide of defeats, but it proves adaptation is possible. Japanese commanders order the technique taught everywhere. But this creates new problems Moon couldn't have anticipated. When defenders kick grenades back, American soldiers charging behind the throw face their own chemical weapons. The first friendly fire incident occurs on August 7th during a 1st Marine Division assault on Peleliu's southern ridges. A private throws an M15 grenade at a cave entrance. The grenade enters cleanly, but a Japanese defender kicks it back out with perfect timing. It detonates among advancing Marines. 3 dead. 7 wounded with phosphorus burns that medics cannot treat. The chemical eats through flesh for hours. Men scream until morphine stops their hearts. But Moon's greatest challenge isn't Japanese countermeasures. Back at 6th Army headquarters in Hollandia, Moon receives devastating news. Production quality of M15 grenades has collapsed under rushed expansion. Manufacturers pressured to increase output 5-fold cut corners everywhere. Fuse quality control fails. Some grenades detonate immediately upon impact, killing the thrower. Others have 8-second delays instead of 4, giving defenders time to react. Some leak phosphorus during tropical storage, creating unstable weapons that ignite spontaneously. The accident reports stack up through August. A grenade detonates in a supply tent on Guam, killing 12 soldiers in their sleep. Another explodes during loading operations, setting fire to an entire ammunition ship. 42 casualties. A training accident at Oro Bay when a defective M15 ignites prematurely. 5 instructors dead. The weapons that saved hundreds of lives are now killing Americans through manufacturing defects. Major Thornton compiles every accident report with grim satisfaction. His warnings about rushed deployment and safety violations have proven prophetic. He sends a formal recommendation to General Kruger. Immediate recall of all M15 grenades from frontline units pending quality inspection. Return to Mark II fragmentation grenades as primary bunker assault weapon. Suspend white phosphorus program indefinitely. The recommendation reaches Kruger's desk on August 10th, the same day Moon arrives for his scheduled meeting. Kruger looks at Moon with tired eyes. "Sergeant, your technique has saved lives. No question. But it's also killed 48 Americans in accidents during the last month. The Ordnance Department wants to shut down the entire program." Moon's hands clench. "Sir, those deaths are from manufacturing problems, not tactical employment. Fix the quality control." Kruger taps the thick folder of accident reports. "How many more men die while we fix it?" "More than will die, going back to Mark IIs that don't work." Moon's voice is quiet but steady. The question hangs in the air like smoke. Before Kruger can answer, Lieutenant Chen bursts into the office. "Sir, we're receiving reports from the 81st Infantry Division on Angkor Island. They've encountered something new. The Japanese have modified their bunkers." Kruger spreads the intelligence photos across his desk. The images show Japanese fortifications unlike anything seen before. Multiple compartments, sealed doors, ventilation shafts positioned to channel smoke and heat away from defenders. Chen points to key features. These positions are specifically designed to survive white phosphorus assault. The enemy has adapted faster than we anticipated. Moon studies the photographs with growing concern. If white phosphorus doesn't work, and Mark IIs still bounce off. What do we use? Nobody has an answer. The weapon that changed Pacific warfare for 2 months faces obsolescence. But then Chen notices something in the corner of one photograph. "Sir, look at this ventilation shaft. It's exposed. External piping running up the hillside. If we could redirect white phosphorus into the ventilation system instead of through the firing slits." Moon finishes the thought. "We could fill the entire bunker through the one system they built to save themselves." Kruger looks between them. Can it work? Moon calculates angles and trajectories in his head. "Sir, I'd need to see the actual positions. But if those ventilation shafts are accessible, white phosphorus smoke would flow through every compartment. Their countermeasure becomes their vulnerability. We leave for Angkor tonight, pack for combat. But this is all theoretical until someone proves it works under fire." August 19th, 1944. Angkor Island, 3 miles south of Peleliu. The 81st Infantry Division has been fighting for 3 days with minimal progress. Japanese defenders occupy a ridge system called the Romaldo Pocket, a warren of interconnected caves and bunkers that dominates the southern approaches. Traditional assault methods achieve nothing. Artillery bounces off coral. Flamethrowers can't reach cave depths. White phosphorus grenades enter the modified bunkers and vent harmlessly through new chimney systems. American casualties mount. 37 dead, 91 wounded. The division commander authorizes Moon's experimental approach as a last resort. Moon arrives at the front lines with Chen and a hand-picked squad of 6 soldiers, all veterans who've mastered white phosphorus techniques. They study the Romaldo Pocket from observation posts 500 yards away. The Japanese positions are masterpieces of defensive engineering. The main bunker complex occupies high ground with overlapping fields of fire, at least 8 machine gun positions, maybe 40 defenders, and clearly visible along the ridgeline external ventilation pipes rising 3 feet above the coral. Moon spots what he needs. Those pipes are accessible from a dead angle on the eastern approach. If we can reach them without being spotted, we can pump white phosphorus directly into their ventilation system. Chen does quick calculations. Each pipe services multiple compartments. 4 grenades properly placed could fill the entire complex. It's brilliant. It's also suicide. The approach is 800 yards of open ground. Moon shrugs. So we go at night. The assault begins at 2200 hours on August 20th. Moon's squad moves in absolute darkness under a moonless sky. They carry 20 M15 grenades carefully inspected for defects. Every man knows the stakes. If this fails, the white phosphorus program dies. If it succeeds, they've found a way to defeat Japanese adaptations. They reach the base of the ridge without detection. Above them, ventilation pipes rise from coral formations like industrial chimneys. Moon signals his squad into positions. Each man knows his target pipe, his throwing sequence, his escape route. Moon takes the main ventilation shaft serving the command bunker. He pulls an M15 grenade, calculates the upward trajectory needed to drop it directly into the pipe opening. One chance to prove this works. He throws. The grenade arcs upward in the darkness. Perfect trajectory. It drops into the ventilation pipe and disappears. 4 seconds. Nothing happens. Then the ridge erupts. Not with explosions. With screams. White phosphorus smoke pours from every cave opening, every firing slit, every crack in the coral. The Japanese ventilation system designed to protect defenders now pumps chemical fire throughout the entire complex. Temperatures inside spike instantly to 5,000 degrees. The atmosphere becomes unbreathable. Defenders have 3 choices: stay and suffocate, flee and face American rifles, or burn. Most choose to flee. They stumble from cave mouths choking and blind. Moon's squad cuts them down methodically. Others try to fight through the smoke. They fire wildly, hitting nothing. Some stay inside too long, breathing superheated air that sears their lungs. They die without ever seeing their killers. The entire action lasts 11 minutes. When smoke clears, the Romaldo pocket falls silent. Moon's squad advances cautiously. They clear 18 bunker positions without resistance. They count 43 Japanese dead, most from smoke inhalation and heat. American casualties from the assault: 0. Absolutely 0. Officers watching from observation posts cannot believe what they witnessed. The most fortified position on Angkor Island, the position that killed 37 Americans in 3 days, eliminated in 11 minutes without friendly casualties. The technique works, better than before. The Japanese modifications designed to counter white phosphorus actually made them more vulnerable. Division Commander Colonel Robert Dark sends an immediate report to 6th Army. Subject: New tactical employment of white phosphorus grenades against modified defensive positions. Result: complete success. Recommend immediate theater-wide adoption. The Ridge Assault proves everything. White phosphorus remains the dominant bunker weapon even against Japanese countermeasures. You just have to adapt the application. Moon's innovation evolves again. Within days, infantry companies across the Pacific receive updated protocols. Primary approach: firing slits when possible. Secondary approach: ventilation systems when present. The Japanese built elaborate defenses to survive one attack method. Americans simply found another. But the Angkor assault does more than validate tactics. It breaks Japanese confidence in their defensive doctrine. Intelligence intercepts show Tokyo's reaction. Their bunker modifications failed catastrophically. 43 dead without inflicting casualties. American forces adapted in days to countermeasures that took months to design. The psychological impact devastates Japanese defensive planning. If improved bunkers can't stop white phosphorus, what can field reports from Peleliu document the collapse? Japanese defenders increasingly abandon fortified positions before American assault. They retreat deeper into cave systems. They avoid prepared defenses that now feel like death traps. The weapons intended to protect them have become coffins. American commanders exploit the fear ruthlessly. They announce white phosphorus attacks hours in advance. They give defenders time to imagine the heat, the smoke, the chemical fire. Often, Japanese troops evacuate before assault begins. Positions taken without firing a shot. By September 1944, the statistics tell an undeniable story. Bunker assault casualties drop 78% compared to pre-Moon tactics. The 1st Marine Division clears 200 fortified positions on Peleliu with fewer casualties than 50 bunkers cost on Tarawa. The 96th Infantry Division reports that 40% of targeted Japanese positions now surrender or evacuate rather than face white phosphorus assault. Moon's technique doesn't just kill more efficiently, it terrifies so completely that enemies choose not to fight. The strategic impact cascades beyond individual battles. MacArthur's staff recalculates the timeline for Philippines' liberation. Previous estimates assumed 6 months and 25,000 casualties. Updated projections using white phosphorus effectiveness show 4 months and 12,000 casualties. They're not just saving lives, they're accelerating victory. Production of M15 grenades increases from 6.8 million units in 1944 to 11.2 million in 1945, despite quality control problems. Manufacturers fix defect rates, training improves, accidents decrease. The weapon Moon improvised on Biak becomes standard equipment across the Pacific. Every infantry company carries white phosphorus grenades. Every assault plan includes them. Every soldier knows the technique. The innovation spreads beyond American forces. British Commonwealth troops fighting in Burma adopt the tactics. Chinese forces trained by American advisors use white phosphorus against Japanese positions in mainland China. Even Soviet forces attacking Japanese forces in Manchuria in August 1945 employ similar methods. What started as one private's desperate improvisation becomes global doctrine. News of Moon's innovation reaches American newspapers in October 1944. The War Department carefully controls the story. They emphasize American ingenuity and fighting spirit. They avoid mentioning that Moon violated regulations. They definitely don't mention the court-martial threats or bureaucratic resistance. The narrative becomes simple. American soldier finds better way to fight. Army adopts it. We're winning. Moon receives the Silver Star in a ceremony at 6th Army headquarters. The citation praises his innovative tactical employment of available resources under combat conditions. It's military language that means he broke rules and succeeded anyway. But medals and recognition matter less to Moon than the letters he receives. From soldiers he trained. From company commanders whose men survived because of his technique. From mothers whose sons came home. One letter arrives in November from a Marine corporal who fought on Peleliu. He writes that Moon's training saved his entire squad when they encountered a bunker complex. Thanks to your technique, we all walked away. My daughter will grow up with a father because you had the courage to do things differently. Moon keeps that letter. He doesn't keep the Silver Star. By December 1944, the white-phosphorus program is so successful that few remember it was ever controversial. The Ordnance Department quietly drops all objections. Major Thornton transfers to a logistics position, where his by-the-book approach causes less friction. Lieutenant Chen receives a captain's commission and assignment to develop next-generation infantry weapons. Moon returns to regular infantry duty, uncomfortable with the attention and recognition. The statistical legacy is irrefutable. Conservative estimates suggest Moon's technique prevented between 4,000 and 6,000 American casualties during the final year of Pacific warfare. That's 4,000 men who came home, 4,000 families kept whole, 4,000 lives that would have ended following regulations that didn't work. The Japanese never found an effective counter. They tried deeper bunkers, more compartments, better ventilation, faster evacuation protocols. Nothing stopped white phosphorus when properly applied. Their defensive strategy that dominated Pacific warfare for 3 years collapsed in 4 months. August 15, 1945. Japan surrenders. The Pacific War ends. Moon has fought through 4 campaigns, survived countless battles, watched too many friends die. He's 23 years old and feels 50. He's ready to go home to Iowa, to his father's dairy farm, to a life where nobody shoots at him. But victory raises questions nobody considered during the fighting. Moon changed warfare. His innovation saved thousands of lives and accelerated Allied victory. He did it by breaking rules, by violating orders, by trusting his own judgment over military doctrine. So what happens to the man who proved that sometimes regulations are wrong? What happens when the war ends and bureaucracy reasserts itself? What happens to innovation that succeeded by defying authority? And what lessons does history learn from a private who changed the world? The white phosphorus technique remains in American military doctrine today. Modern soldiers still use similar weapons against fortified positions. The principle Moon pioneered, adapting chemical weapons to tactical problems, influences combat even now. But few know his name. Few remember the farm boy from Iowa who looked at a problem everyone accepted and said there has to be a better way. In Part 4, we'll discover what happened to Harold Moon after the war ended. The recognition he never wanted. The legacy he tried to avoid. The lessons his story teaches about innovation, courage, and the cost of doing what's right when everyone says you're wrong. Because sometimes the most important battles aren't fought with weapons, they're fought with ideas. And one man's story forgotten by history, but remembered by those he saved. From a forbidden grenade thrown in desperation to a weapon that changed Pacific warfare. Harold Moon's innovation cleared 20 bunkers in one day, survived bureaucratic resistance, defeated Japanese countermeasures, and saved thousands of American lives. His technique accelerated victory and rewrote military doctrine. But what happened to the man who started it all? What became of the farm boy from Iowa who proved that sometimes breaking rules saves lives? This story has one final twist that nobody expected. Because success in war sometimes comes with a price that victory cannot repay. August 15, 1945. Japan surrenders. The Pacific War ends after 3 years and 8 months of brutal fighting. Harold Moon stands on a beach in Okinawa, watching the celebration, feeling nothing. He's 23 years old, but his eyes look 50. He survived 4 major campaigns, watched too many friends die, killed more men than he can count. The white-phosphorus technique he invented has become standard across the Pacific, but Moon never wanted fame or recognition. He wanted his friends to survive. Some did. Most didn't. When officers discuss his silver star and possible promotion to Lieutenant, Moon declines politely. "Sir, I just want to go home. Help my father with the dairy farm. Forget any of this ever happened." The Army processes his discharge in October 1945. He boards a troopship in Manila with 3,000 other soldiers, all desperate to leave the Pacific behind. During the 2-week voyage across the ocean, men swap stories about the battles they survived. Someone mentions the white phosphorus grenades that made bunker assaults survivable. Moon stays silent. He doesn't mention that he invented the technique, doesn't explain how he violated regulations that everyone now follows. When soldiers ask his name, he tells them and watches no recognition cross their faces. Perfect. That's exactly what he wants. Moon arrives in San Francisco on November 3, 1945. He takes a bus to Iowa, watching America pass outside the window. The country looks impossibly clean and safe. No bomb craters, no burned villages, no bodies. He cannot reconcile this peaceful nation with the hell he left behind. Grundy County, Iowa looks exactly as Moon remembers. His father's dairy farm. The north 40 acres where he used to plant corn. The barn where he learned to throw tools with perfect accuracy, the skill that would save thousands of lives in a war he never wanted to fight. His father meets him at the bus station, older and grayer than Moon remembers. They shake hands awkwardly. His father never learned to express emotion. "Welcome home, son." Moon nods. "Good to be back, Dad." That's the entire conversation. They drive to the farm in silence. Moon tries to readjust to civilian life. He works the farm, milks cows, repairs fences, plants, crops. The physical labor helps. When his hands are busy, his mind can't wander back to coral bunkers and white smoke and screaming men. But nights are difficult. He dreams about Biak, about the first bunker he cleared with forbidden grenades, about the Japanese defenders who died because he decided regulations were wrong. He wakes up sweating, smelling phosphorus that isn't there. His father never asks about the war. The community welcomes him home, but doesn't press for stories. This is Iowa in 1945. Men don't talk about trauma. They work hard and move forward. Moon tries. He starts dating his high school sweetheart, Mary Sullivan, who waited 4 years while he fought across the Pacific. They marry in June 1946 in a small ceremony at the Methodist Church. No military honors. No mentions of his silver star. Just a simple Iowa wedding. Mary knows something happened to him in the war, something that changed him fundamentally, but Moon never explains. How do you tell someone about burning men alive with chemical weapons? How do you explain that you're famous in military circles for a technique nobody outside the Army knows about? The years pass quietly. Moon takes over his father's farm completely in 1950. He and Mary have 3 children, 2 daughters and a son. He's a good father, patient and kind, but there's something distant in his eyes that his children notice but cannot name. He never displays his silver star. He keeps it in a drawer buried under old tax forms and receipts. When the local VFW chapter invites him to join and share his experiences, he declines politely. "I'd rather not talk about it." In 1954, the Grundy County Register tries to write a feature story about the town's war hero. The reporter researches Moon's service record, discovers his Silver Star citation, learns vague details about his innovative tactical contributions. She calls Moon for an interview. He refuses. "Ma'am, I appreciate the interest, but I didn't do anything special. Lots of men did more than me." The reporter pushes. But according to military records, your technique saved thousands of lives. You changed how the Pacific War was fought. Moon's voice goes flat. Those men still died. Just slower and more painful than if I'd done nothing. Please don't write the story. She respects his wishes. The story never runs. For decades, Moon lives in comfortable obscurity. He works his farm, raises his children, attends church on Sundays, lives the quiet Iowa life he always wanted. His children know their father fought in World War II, but learn almost nothing about what he did. His grandchildren grow up hearing only that Grandpa Harold was in the army during the war. The details die with his silence, but Moon cannot completely escape his legacy. In 1982, the 41st Infantry Division holds a reunion in Des Moines. Moon receives an invitation but plans to ignore it. He hasn't attended a single reunion in 37 years. Why start now? But Mary convinces him. You've been carrying something since the war. Maybe seeing old friends will help. Moon attends reluctantly. He walks into the hotel conference room, filled with elderly men, most he doesn't recognize. They've all gotten old, he thinks. Then he realizes he's old too. 60 years old. When did that happen? An elderly man approaches him, tears already forming in his eyes. Sergeant Moon. Moon studies the man's face, searching memory. I'm sorry, I don't. I'm Daniel Winters. My father was Captain James Winters, your company commander on Biak. Moon's breath catches. Captain Winters. The officer who defended Moon's unauthorized tactics, who risked his own career to support a private who violated regulations. How is your father? The man's tears fall freely now. He died in 1979. But before he passed, he told me something. He told me to find you if I ever could. He wanted you to know that he kept a list of every man in Easy Company who survived the war. He calculated that without your technique, at least 47 of them would have died on Biak. He said you saved his company. He said you were the bravest soldier he ever commanded because you had the courage to be right when everyone else was following orders that were wrong. Moon stands there, unable to speak. 47 men. He never knew, never calculated. Captain Winters carried that number for 34 years, carried the knowledge of what Moon's courage meant. The reunion changes something in Moon. Not dramatically. He still doesn't talk about the war often, but he stops hiding from it completely. When his grandchildren ask about World War II, he shares small stories. Not about killing, not about burning men alive, but about friendship and sacrifice and doing what's right even when it's difficult. Moon dies in 1998 at age 76. Heart failure. Quick and relatively painless. His obituary in the Grundy County Register mentions his military service in one sentence. Harold Moon, 76, served in the U.S. Army during World War II in the Pacific Theater. It doesn't mention the 20 bunkers, the thousands of lives saved, the technique that changed warfare. At his funeral, 3 elderly men attend whom the family doesn't recognize. They introduce themselves as members of Easy Company 163rd Infantry Regiment men who fought beside Moon on Biak. They're here to pay respects to the man who saved their lives. They tell Moon's children and grandchildren what their father never would, that he was a hero, that he changed history, that thousands of Americans came home because of his courage. The family listens in shock. They never knew. Moon never wanted them to know. But what Moon didn't know, couldn't know, was how far his legacy would reach. The white-phosphorus bunker assault technique he invented didn't die with World War II. It evolved and spread and saved lives in wars he never saw. The M15 white-phosphorus grenade remains in the U.S. military arsenal throughout the Korean War, Vietnam War, and into the modern era. The model designation changes. M15 becomes M34, then AN M14. The chemistry improves. The fuses get more reliable. But the fundamental principle Moon discovered on Biak in 1944 remains unchanged. Heavy incendiary grenades work better against fortified positions than fragmentation grenades. Use the defender's own ventilation against them. During the Korean War from 1950 to 1953, U.S. forces encountered Chinese and North Korean bunkers built with Soviet engineering assistance. These positions are sophisticated, reinforced with concrete and steel, designed to withstand artillery. American troops use white-phosphorus grenades exactly as Moon taught 37 years earlier. Target ventilation systems. Use the weight for accuracy. Accept the shorter fuse time. The technique works as well against communist bunkers as it did against Japanese positions. Casualty statistics from Korea prove the continuing effectiveness. Bunker assault casualties drop 62% when white phosphorus grenades are employed properly compared to conventional assault methods. That's thousands more Americans who survive because a farm boy from Iowa decided to try something forbidden. In Vietnam, the technique adapts again. Viet Cong tunnel complexes present challenges similar to Japanese cave systems. Deep, interconnected, designed to survive bombardment. U.S. forces use white phosphorus grenades to clear tunnels when conventional weapons fail. The infamous tunnel rat soldiers who descended into enemy tunnel systems carry white phosphorus grenades as primary weapons. The chemical smoke fills tunnel networks, forcing defenders out or killing them through heat and asphyxiation. It's the same principle Moon used on Angkor Island in 1944 applied to a different war. Modern U.S. military forces still carry white phosphorus munitions. The current designation is M15A2, a direct descendant of the grenade Moon first threw on Biak 80 years ago. The chemistry has improved. Burn temperature increased, smoke production optimized, safety features enhanced. But soldiers in Iraq and Afghanistan use these weapons against fortified positions using techniques Moon would recognize instantly. Identify the target. Calculate the approach. Use weight and trajectory for accuracy. The training manuals have changed over 8 decades, but Moon's fundamental innovation remains at their core. Beyond American forces, the technique spread globally. British Commonwealth troops adopted white phosphorus bunker assault tactics in the 1950s. NATO standardized the procedures in the 1960s. Israeli defense forces used similar methods during conflicts with Arab nations. Even former Soviet forces studying captured American equipment and interrogating prisoners developed their own incendiary grenades based on the same principles Moon discovered. The total impact becomes staggering when calculated across 80 years. Conservative estimates suggest that white phosphorus bunker assault techniques have saved between 40,000 and 60,000 lives across multiple conflicts. 40,000 soldiers who survived battles they statistically should have died in. 40,000 families kept whole. 40,000 lives extended because one man questioned whether regulations made sense. The weapon Moon improvised in desperate combat has been used in every major American military conflict since World War II. Korea, Vietnam, Grenada, Panama, Gulf War, Iraq, Afghanistan. 8 decades, 11 conflicts, countless battles, all using the fundamental technique a private developed by violating direct orders. But Moon's greatest legacy isn't the weapon itself. It's the lesson his story teaches about innovation and courage. The U.S. military studied Moon's case extensively after World War II. How did a private with no formal engineering training solve a problem that weapons experts couldn't? Why did the system resist an obviously superior solution? What institutional barriers prevent good ideas from being heard? These questions led to fundamental changes in how the military approaches innovation. The modern U.S. military has formal programs for soldier-driven innovation. Mechanisms for enlisted personnel to submit tactical improvements without fear of discipline. Rapid prototyping systems that can test new ideas within days instead of years. Cultural changes that reward questioning doctrine when evidence suggests better approaches. Moon's story appears in leadership training at West Point, Annapolis, and the Air Force Academy, not as a case study in weapons, but as an example of courage. The courage to trust your own judgment when authority says you're wrong. The courage to risk punishment for doing what's right. the courage to persist when everyone tells you to give up. Officers learn that sometimes the best ideas come from unexpected sources. That rank and credentials don't determine who has good ideas. That systems which punish all deviation eventually stagnate and fail. Moon proved that innovation requires both the courage to break rules and the wisdom to know which rules deserve breaking. His story inspired countless other military innovations over the past 8 decades. Soldiers who saw problems developed solutions and pushed for adoption despite institutional resistance. The improved body armor that saved thousands of lives in Iraq came from a sergeant who decided standard protection wasn't good enough. The counter-IED tactics that reduced roadside bomb casualties came from junior officers who questioned established procedures. The drone warfare revolution that changed modern combat started with low-ranking officers who saw potential in technology that senior leadership dismissed. Every military innovation follows Moon's pattern. Someone sees a problem clearly. They develop a solution using available resources and practical knowledge. They face resistance from systems designed to maintain orthodoxy. They persist through rejection and skepticism. Eventually, evidence overwhelms objections. The innovation spreads and saves lives. Moon didn't invent this pattern, but his story perfectly embodies it. Beyond military applications, Moon's legacy influences how organizations think about innovation generally. Business schools teach his case as an example of how good ideas emerge from unexpected places. Silicon Valley companies cite his story when discussing the value of empowering employees at all levels. Management consultants use Moon's experience to explain why rigid hierarchies stifle innovation. The principle is universal. When you punish all deviation from rules, you eliminate the experimentation necessary for improvement. When you trust only credentialed experts, you miss insights from people with practical experience. When you prioritize following procedure over achieving results, you guarantee mediocrity. Moon proved that sometimes the most important innovations come from people nobody expects. The ones without credentials, without authority, without permission. They come from people who see problems clearly, understand what needs to be done, and have the courage to act, even when everyone tells them they're wrong. But there's one final detail about Moon's story that most people don't know, a detail that only came to light when military historians gained access to Japanese archives in the 1990s. Colonel Naoyuki Kuzume, the Japanese commander who defended Biak Island, survived the battle. He retreated into deeper cave systems as his fortified positions fell to American white-phosphorus assault. On June 22, 1944, as American forces closed in on his final position, Kuzume committed ritual suicide rather than surrender. Before his death, he wrote a final report to Imperial headquarters describing the battle. That report, discovered in Japanese archives 50 years later, contains a remarkable passage. The American forces have employed a new weapon that defeats all our defensive preparations. Chemical fire that fills our strongest positions and makes defense impossible. This weapon is used with great skill and tactical intelligence. Our soldiers cannot withstand it. I have failed in my duty to hold this position. The defeat is mine alone. The enemy's innovation is superior. We cannot counter it with current methods. What makes this passage remarkable is what it reveals. Kuzume, a professional military officer with decades of experience, recognized Moon's innovation immediately as a fundamental tactical breakthrough. He didn't blame his soldiers. He didn't claim bad luck or insufficient resources. He acknowledged clearly that the Americans had found a better way to fight. This Japanese commander, Moon's enemy, understood the significance of what Moon had done better than the American Ordnance Department that tried to stop it. Kuzume's report circulated through Japanese military leadership in July 1944. It contributed directly to the decision to abandon fixed defensive positions in favor of mobile defense. Japan's entire defensive strategy in the Pacific changed because of Moon's innovation. The irony is profound. Moon wanted to be forgotten. He never sought recognition or fame. He just wanted to save his friends and go home. But his enemy recognized his genius and documented it for history, even as American authorities tried to suppress it. From a dairy farmer with a 10th grade education and a forbidden idea to a weapon that saved 40,000 lives across 8 decades of warfare. Harold Moon proved that courage isn't just about facing enemy fire. It's about having the wisdom to see what's wrong and the bravery to fix it even when everyone says you can't. Thanks to his willingness to break rules that didn't work, thousands of Americans survived battles they should have died in. Thousands of families stayed whole. Thousands of lives extended that would have ended following regulations designed to maintain order rather than save lives. That's the power of one person who refuses to accept that the way things are is the way things must be. Moon never wanted to be remembered. He just wanted to do what was right. History remembered him anyway, not in monuments or textbooks, but in the thousands of soldiers who came home because he had the courage to question authority when lives hung in the balance. Sometimes the most important innovations don't come from laboratories or planning rooms. They come from battlefields and factory floors and farmyards. They come from people who see problems with fresh eyes and solve them with practical wisdom. They come from moments when someone decides that saving lives matters more than following rules. Harold Moon had that moment on Biak Island in May 1944. His choice in that moment changed. Warfare saved thousands of lives and taught us that sometimes the greatest courage is the courage to be right when everyone else insists you're wrong. If you know similar stories of forgotten innovators who changed history by breaking rules, share them in the comments below. Because the world needs reminders that genius can come from anywhere, that courage means questioning authority when authority is wrong, and that sometimes one person's decision to do things differently can save thousands of lives. Subscribe to discover more untold stories of ordinary people who did extraordinary things when the world needed them most. Because history isn't made by generals and politicians alone. It's made by farm boys from Iowa who look at an impossible problem and refuse to accept that it can't be solved. That's Harold Moon's legacy. That's why his story matters. And that's why we remember.